Once again, it's time to get your think on. I'm Serge Brown, and this is the Crash Cart Rule. Crash Cart Rule. You know, this is a podcast about life, liberty, and the pursuit of some pretty crazy stuff. So hold on to your tinfoil hat, pull up a comfy chair, and explore with me conspiracy theories, politics, weird happenings, and some plain hard-to-believe true stories. Today, we're talking with Len Ber, one of the very few civilians ever diagnosed with Havana Syndrome. But there are many more affected. So yes, you really should care about Havana Syndrome. We are right back here at the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Serge Brown. Today we have a very interesting guest. His name is Len Ber, and he has been attacked by the Havana Syndrome. He is one of the few civilian cases that has actually been diagnosed, professionally diagnosed, as having Havana Syndrome. Please welcome to the Crash Cart Rule today, Mr. Len Ber. Now, should I say Dr. Len Ber?
You can just call me Len. I'm a medical doctor, but, you know, I don't currently work in the, I work in the regulatory field. But once a physician, always a physician.
Exactly.
So, please call me Len.
You got it. All right. So Len, when we had talked previously, you had mentioned that you had been diagnosed with Havana Syndrome, which struck in 2016 in Havana at our embassy. And one of the reasons that they were hesitant to say that you had it was because you were not a government official. Can you kind of take us through Havana Syndrome and how that diagnosis came about?
Okay. As we all know from the news coverage, late in 2016, early 2017, these diplomats and spies, basically, who were in the U.S. Embassy in Havana, started developing weird symptoms that nobody has ever heard before, and it's a combination of sound that nobody around them heard.
Right.
They literally had roommates that never experienced anything. But the symptomatic ones, and by the way, it never happened in the embassy. It happened at their home quarters.
Oh.
At their apartment. Yeah, this is somewhat misunderstood. It never happened at the embassy. It always happened at their place of residence, either a hotel or the residential apartments. And it continued for several months, always very debilitating. They felt dizzy. They felt enormous head pressure and vibrations. The first reporting of CNN also mentioned that not only noises were heard, but voices, human voices. So at that point, the Department of State contacted Dr. Hoffer, who is a prominent otoneurologist, so a neurologist specializing in the function of the ear, right? Where the gravity organs are situated, and he examined them. He published his findings. And that's how I actually stumbled upon this information, because the same things started happening to me in the summer of 2019. So,
and you're a medical doctor, and so you kind of self-diagnosed yourself.
I pretty much did. When I was going to Dr. Hoffer, I was 90% confident that this is what it is, because there's nothing in the medical literature, subjectively or objectively, there's nothing like it.
Right.
And a lot of critics that saying that Havana Syndrome is a psychogenic mass hysteria and blah blah. They simply don't understand that this is a new constellation of symptoms and findings that the medical community has never seen before. And this is what Dr. Hoffer emphasized in his paper. He diagnosed Havana Syndrome based on the severe damage to the vestibular organs.
Right.
Because vestibular organs are situated in the inner ear, and there are a couple of organs, and they're responsible for up and down and sort of the lateral gravity, and they're all filled with water. So why is this hypothesis of pulse microwave energy as the most plausible causative effect is still on the table? Because it causes cavitation in liquids. Right. So these organs are basically filled. These organs are kind of swim in this liquid, and the cavitation, in fact, is something. It's something similar to a diver's disease when they come up.
Right. Decompression.
It bubbles up, and the bubbles actually damage these vestibular, also called otholytic organs.
Right. So it's kind of like getting the bends when you're diving. My question here would be: was there any permanent damage to anyone that initially had it, or does it just kind of come on and go? Do you have any damage? Is it something that, is it like a headache and it just comes and goes away, or you say the damage to the vestibular organs, is that permanent?
It is permanent, and I have permanent damage. On one of the sides, I have 100% loss of function.
Oh wow!
Vestibular organs. So, but you compensate it with your visual and other things that brain is capable of. But if it doesn't go away in 12 months, it's considered to be permanent. Right. And I have a permanent. My repeat test, made just over a year after the test that Dr. Hoffer did, showed progress, showed that the severity increased. Right. I have permanent brain damage, specifically to the otholytic organs, and I also have other damage to the neural networks. Do these patients, the initial 2,000 patients that Dr. Hoffer examined, have permanent damage? My common sense and medical experience says yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I know that you mentioned something about patient zero. What was the medical outcome of patient zero of Havana Syndrome?
Well, there was an interesting article in the Zeit magazine. The group of German investigative journalists followed the Havana Syndrome development, and they told us in that article about so-called patient zero, the first patient affected by it. Right. And it is clear now that they were in the process, whoever was doing it, they were in the process of calibrating their instrument. And so the first patient got hit so hard that he lost vision and auditory function. So he's basically blind and deaf.
We're going to pick that up a little bit. We're coming up on the end of our first segment, but we're going to pick up patient zero when we come back, talk a little bit more about Dr. Hoffer, and we will talk a lot more about Len Ber when we come back right here on the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Serge Brown. We are back to the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Serge Brown, and today we are speaking with Havana Syndrome experiencer Len Ber. And Len was just telling us about patient zero, what had happened, and also with some of Dr. Hoffer's other patients. But patient zero was suffering. At what cost did patient zero pay for having this, Len?
He lost his vision and he lost his hearing.
And so was that permanent?
Partially it was recovered because brain always finds a way to kind of...
Right, it can patch its way around. Yep.
Yeah, there's neuroplasticity. But initially he was blind and deaf. And what it suggests to me, and there were, another couple of dozen patients in Havana, and what it says to me, and this is purely speculation. We talked about it a little bit, that I'm a speculative person, but this really suggests that it was a process of calibrating these neural weapons on the real human subjects.
It's just like your microwave at home. You turn it up too much, you'll fry whatever you're putting into it. So something more delicate, like human organs, are going to take a lot less directed microwave frequency than, say, a brick, right? I mean, So evidently they just hit them a little too hard and fried those organs a bit more.
Right. So I'd like to make a little note. The regular microwave and the energy that we've been damaged by are quite different. So you can, take a microwave apart and because it's out of the stainless steel and it will damage you. It will damage you definitely. But the microwaves, like any radio waves, they go every other direction. This is why, we have radio stations that it just goes every single way. This is a directed. It means that it forms a beam that can be directed at one's brain.
Like a laser beam.
Exactly like a laser, but laser is formed with light particles.
Yeah.
The photons.
Right.
These are waves, but you can still arrange them so they will form a beam. And then it's pulsed, which is very important because microwave heats up the tissue. Mm-hmm. But if it's very short pulse, it will without burning the surface of the skin, wherever it's directed to, it will produce a short thermoelastic effect. So like a expansion and of the tissue and then cooling off. So just this pulsing is very important. Mm-hmm. And one of the experts that I talked to, he said the reason why you feel the vibrations and a person next to you does not is not because of the specific microwave frequency. It's the pulse rate of this energy. So that pulse rate is synchronized with your brain frequency.
Wow.
And it's all done in lifetime.
So this is not essentially what you're saying is that you are a targeted individual. They've figured out how your brain works and they're targeting that wave to affect you. Is that correct?
That is correct. And we really need the major misunderstanding that people have about this. Yes, they talk about it's a neuro weapon. It potentially. So the National Academy of Sciences reviewed multiple hypotheses, and they said the most plausible is directed pulse microwave energy. And so the question is it intentional? And the answer is definitely intentional.
Right.
If it's done with intent, there's intelligence behind it. Mm-hmm. And if there's an intelligence behind it, artificial or human intelligence, it means that it is capable of deceit. And so the findings that we have and the specific features of these attacks, we cannot conclude with confidence whether it's designed to deceive you,
right,
and people who investigate, or it is a feature of the actual weapon. And I'm very confident that not a single weapon and single frequency is used. It utilizes multiple ways to affect your brain.
I remember in 2016 when it first happened, one of the questions that was asked is somebody standing in the next room pointing pointing a weapon at somebody, or is it something further away? How far away do you think that this can be? And if you say it's not a single energy beam, how does that work? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it a grid pattern?
Right. So once again, I'm not a physicist, not an expert. So what I'm saying is my best explanation and speculation based on the things that I heard from the experts.
Right.
So some experts say if it's there's a causative agent, which is that specific kind of energy, which you can't catch walking down the street. It's not like Wi-Fi. Right. It's not like microwave. It's specifically designed to target and damage your brain. So, right. So that's the causative agent. And then there's delivery system, like a virus. You can inject it. You can inhale it. So different delivery methods. Mm-hmm. And so the experts whose thinking is that this is a ray gun type situation says that 2-3 miles away you can still achieve a beam that is
Len, if you can hold that thought right there, we're coming up on the end of our second segment. And we, of course, for those of you listening on the radio, you know why we segment this program out. I'm Serge Brown. This is the Crash Cart Rule. We're talking to Len Ber. Remember, go ahead and keep those emails coming to me, sergey@thecrashcartrule.com. We'll be back in 2 minutes. If you are just joining us, we are talking with Len Ber, and Len is one of the very few people who has been officially diagnosed with the Havana Syndrome. Now, Len, when we last left, we were just talking about how that attack can happen, and how there's not probably just one beam, but maybe a number of them. And are they shot from the next room over? Is it, a mile away? Is somebody standing next to you? How does that happen? You mentioned that it could be up to a couple of miles away. Can they shoot it down from a satellite?
That's a very good question. So the satellite hypothesis is definitely a plausible one. The definition of satellite technology has increased so dramatically that you can pinpoint a single cell from a satellite. I don't remember if in the 70s they demonstrated that they can read a license plate of a car from a satellite. Mm-hmm. Well, it's been 50 years. The science does not stand still, especially military science that has unlimited budget. And we don't really know where that black budget that the CIA received,
exactly
what project it actually goes to. But 50 years ahead, imagine what technology you had 50 years ago, and then think about what you have today.
Exactly.
So the resolution, the capacity. the capacity to identify it's not just someone's brain, but a single neuron in your brain. You can do it from the satellite.
I have heard that we now have technology so great that we can read the date on a dime from a satellite.
Oh, that's nothing. Cells are much smaller.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is
if that's what they're telling us.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also another way to deliver it, and it's something called HARP. I don't know if you heard that expression.
It's very familiar with HARP.
Yeah, HAARP. It's a land-based phase array radar that sends and receives signal. It was there are about 5 of them on the planet, and it has full coverage. What it does, though, it doesn't just work by itself. It bounces off the ionosphere, which serves as a concave magnifying glass, and so that signal, it's a just like with satellite, it is two-way street. It receives information and it sends information, and so this is not a very plausible mechanism how this information is delivered and a specific person is targeted. Most likely, you can identify people by their specific brain frequency. Every molecule has a frequency, like your DNA has a specific resonant frequency. It's like a tuning fork. It will resonate if the frequency is right. Obviously, it's more complicated with organic molecules, but nevertheless, anything made from matter has a resonant frequency, and so it will resonate. So if you send a signal of that frequency, your molecules will start vibrating, and that's one of the possibilities. We really don't know much about it because this technology is shrouded in government secrecy. And we know that the U.S. government has been working on this for years, decades, and once they started making some advancement, that information disappears from the public coverage. But every neuroweapon experts tells us, from Dr. Giordano to Robert McRae to Armin Krishnan, these are all people, and some that I cannot name, and also the whistleblowers, the Robert Duncan, who actually was a part of developing this technology, and then when he found out that it was used against American citizens, he quit, and he went to Congress with a testimony, and the Intelligence Committee completely ignored it.
So that begs the question, is this technology an American technology that is being used or at least tested on Americans? Because we know that the other Havana syndromes have happened in American installations around the world. And then we have 20 college students that come down with the exact same thing as well that aren't anywhere near an American installation. So is it an American test, or is it an American? Are they purposely targeting people now just to say, hey, let's pick that? Were you in the right place at the wrong time? Really,
it's possible. I once again don't want to speculate, but you asked me, is it possible that the parts of U.S. government is using people, federal employees, CIA agents and diplomats and civilians as test subjects for the neuroweapons that they so much desire? It is possible. It is also possible that it is a non-government, some kind of international cartel that has access to this technology. Because we heard from the CIA director Burns that they couldn't find a state actor. And this wording is so peculiar that there's not a state actor that we could find involved in this. Mm-hmm. So interpret at your own will. Right. I mean, is it a non-state actor? Is it something?
Is it the deep state actor?
Outside of any nation state.
Right. The one of the reasons that I look at that is because when you mention HAARP, right, those of us who follow chemtrails and the massive spraying in the sky, and I've got a number of doctors that I've had on, we talk about that, how that heavy chemical that they spray, or the heavy metals rather, and chemicals that they spray in the sky, then they use a 1 billion watt HAARP station. And my understanding is that there are over 100 HAARP stations now around the world. 1 billion watts heat up the ionosphere. You can either superheat or super cold an area if you heat different areas and allow that, that area of pressure in, right? If you drop that and then you're changing the jet stream, you can direct that beam anywhere. And my question that I'm leading up to, it makes me think that any number of people can be involved. It could be a side effect, but if you're saying that it's targeted to that particular human's vibration, it seems like it's very targeted. Also, does it have, we know that the graphene oxide plays a big part in what they have been spraying, especially since late 2019. And graphene oxide is in the COVID vaccines. We know just from a recent German study came out, that vibrates at a certain frequency. Could it possibly be that they have dosed populations with graphene oxide or another nanoparticle, and then are vibrating that inside you to create the Havana Syndrome?
It's possible. Graphene oxide is so promiscuous. It gets in your body, it lodges itself inside your neurons, penetrates blood-brain barrier, lodges in the neurons inside. And I'm not familiar with any method how you can get them out of your nervous system. And so they serve as antennas. They just magnify signal. They just make the job easier. And so if it's in every single one of them, then we are all potentially targets.
And wouldn't that be the perfect weapon?
Well, it would be definitely an easy way to control what the population think.
Right.
There's a connection between Havana Syndrome and mind control, and I'm not making it up. This is I spoke to the experts that specifically brought it up, that this is just a tip of the iceberg. It is really what's below it is so much bigger than we think, and it does include elements of mind control,
which is exactly what the MK Ultra program has been about. How do we control that mind? And MK Ultra, it uses directed energy weapons to achieve that. Is Havana Syndrome the next evolution, the next iteration of the MK Ultra program? Have they really stepped on something that they say, oh, we know now that this works? Although patient 0 suffered hugely. Well, the rest of the people are experiencing, symptoms on a wide variety of levels. It's absolutely frightening when you can just at a moment's notice stop an entire population.
That is very terrifying, and I can tell you that Havana Syndrome, because of its overt nature, because people who are victims of it, they know what's going on. It has been made clear to them that it's been done to them. Mind control can be done without the sort of this degradation of the brain. So the same neurotechnology that can enhance our brain function can be used to damage our brain function. And so what we now call Havana Syndrome is a part of the brain degradation program. It's a slow kill. People age faster.
I'm telling you, it sounds so much like the vaccine, what's been happening with COVID, long COVID, and the vaccine. We're going to pick more of that up when we come back. Coming up on the end of our segment, I'm Serge Brown. We're talking with Len Ber about the Havana Syndrome right here on the Crash Cart Rule. If you want to hear more of our shows, check us out at thecrashcartrule.com. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Crash Cart Rule. I'm Serge Brown. We're talking about the Havana Syndrome, and there's some really odd things going on with it. I have Len Ber, who is a targeted individual and has been suffering at the hands of this very dangerous. What is it? A disease? Is it a condition? Len, what do we call it? And is there a cure for it?
There's no cure for it. As far as we know, rehabilitation program doesn't work. It's a type of chronic brain injury. It's a lot of doctors are trying to frame it as a functional neurologic disorder when kind of there's initial trauma and then just brain generates this sensation.
Right.
This is absolutely not. And so it's a chronic brain injury. To aim to degrade neurologic function of the target. Mm-hmm. And some are doing it faster, some are doing it slower. I seem to be on a very fast-track program because I have these attacks daily, several times. They're debilitating. I can't tolerate them as much as I used to. Can you
explain what those attacks are for the people listening? Is it just a headache? Is it a sore muscle? Is it crippling? What is that attack? And does that vary?
Yeah, it varies by duration and intensity. The most interesting feature is sudden onset. It's like somebody turned on the switch and you start vibrating, like really every molecule of your body. Your head vibrates and there's enormous pressure. And I was trying to describe it, and the best metaphor I came up with is that your head feels like a water balloon and a beehive at the same time. Ooh. So this is the strangest sensation. It's crippling. I get absolutely, I cannot walk. The other day, it happened in the parking lot in front of my building. I kind of made a scene, but it made me scream out of my lungs. This is intolerable. And then it just goes away just like that. And then takes me, an hour to kind of recover. I just had one this morning for a couple of hours. And then now I seem like I'm, speaking okay.
Yeah.
But an hour ago, I could barely find words to express myself. So dizziness, confusion, instability, like I can't stand on my feet. I use a cane now. I hold on to the walls. I prefer to lie down because, standing up, you just don't have any ability to maintain yourself upright. So,
is there a way to protect yourself from it? Can you use a Faraday cage? Can you wear a helmet like a super villain does, So, Dr. X doesn't get in his brain. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but this subject, sounds crazy.
Well, the penetration power of this technology is so great that I tried over the years all kind of shielding, and they do not work. In fact, when you use shielding, the attacks intensify. So I stopped using shielding because it just a waste of time and money and effort.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's because it's holding that attack in, or because they're dialing up the attack to get through the shielding?
They're dialing up the attack. So no matter what, you're going to get it.
So this is a sentient being. I'm sorry to interrupt, but so this is a sentient being. Somebody's actually watching this attack happen in real time in order to know what's going on. But
not necessarily human. Everything animated, and I have good reason to believe that this is also automated, and there's
AI technology.
And, the AI is running this program. And this is what people don't understand, that innovation and creativity does not exclusively belong to people with good intentions.
Right.
Malevolent creativity is just as powerful and just as deceitful as the good one. There's an expression that the generals always fighting their last war, because they apply their current thinking to clearly novel threats. Mm-hmm. And this is a novel threat. And so it needs novel thinking. So knowing about intentionality, knowing about the intelligence that's behind it, we can't just treat it as like another environmental factor, right? Because it's done with intention. It's done with intention to harm and done with intention to deceit. And I want to emphasize this. The government, and these are not my words, Attorney Mark Zaid, who is representing federal clients of his with Havana Syndrome, mm-hmm. repeatedly said in his interview to New York Times and other news agencies that the government does not want to recognize any domestic cases of Havana Syndrome. Forget about civilians. There are right. cases when FBI agents themselves have been harmed by it, and the government does not want to recognize it. And wow. So basically, they're not serving us. Mm-hmm. They're not protecting us. My case have been forwarded to the Department of Defense, to the FBI, and nobody is investigating it. And I want my government to investigate my case and to protect me and all other victims.
You would think they would want to, right? I mean, this is a targeted weapon. You would think that our government would be all over that unless they already know about it.
There's a good chance they already know about it. Yeah. Certain parts of the government. I don't think the Congress people know about it.
I don't think they know much about anything.
Yes.
They're really kept in the dark. I mean, there's only a few congressmen and senators that really understand what the reality is going on in America. We had talked a little bit about graphene oxide and graphene hydroxide, how it is sprayed. We know it's in chemtrails. We know that it is in the COVID-19 vaccine. And there has been a lot of speculation about 5G and its ability to target down to an individual if they chose. Is that a possibility that 5G technology, and the rollout came the exact same time that COVID did, and 5G symptoms are very similar to what you're explaining about Havana Syndrome. Is there any correlation there?
There's a correlation. 5G operates in a very low frequency microwave range, exactly the same frequencies that the human brain operates, the single digit hertz.
5G is very AI driven.
Very AI driven, correct. However, the difference between the effect of 5G on one's brain and one's nervous system and the Havana Syndrome is the intensity of brain damage. So 5G by itself, even though it affects the brain, it doesn't. The damage does not reach the levels seen in Havana Syndrome. So my guess is yes, 5G is related, but Havana Syndrome has more intensity to bring the actual brain damage and brain degradation to the target.
Right. My curiosity stems from speaking with Dr. Anna Mihalcha, who her practice is treating COVID patients, long COVID patients, and patients suffering from the adverse effects of the vaccine. I did reach out to her yesterday, just mentioned you and the possibility, because she had sent me an article a week or so ago about this German company that has discovered that the graphene oxide and graphene hydroxide that is now in the blood from both breathing it in from chemtrails and from having it injected in a vaccine, it actually will build nanostructures. Then it can take those structures apart as well. So my curiosity, and I'm probably way off base here, but is it possible that 5G instructs these nanoparticles, the graphene oxide in your body, to build a structure and damage you for a little while to receive, right? Because you, just like HARP, transmits and receives, and those are big disks that send out all of that energy. Well, a nanostructure can look exactly like a satellite dish, a receiver. It can receive and retain energy, and it can instruct those nanoparticles to do whatever they want. Just hearing myself say it, I know it sounds so sci-fi, but then again, we look at this extremely well done German study on the nanoparticles that are in the human body, and they're building structures. How are they getting that information? What's going on if it is not being directed by a low frequency microwave, directed in microwave? And because 5G is in any number of spots, they can take 2 or 3 of those beams and find any one single particular person and direct that energy beam to just that person. Literally, you could be standing in a packed subway and be the only person suffering from the attack because it's that well defined.
It's possible, and it's the fact that it sounds sci-fi does not scare me at all, because Havana Syndrome sounds like sci-fi,
right?
And level of technology saying this sounds like sci-fi, we should treat it as an acknowledgement of one's ignorance and maybe intellectual laziness.
Yeah.
So it is a hypothesis that you just formed, and the strength of every hypothesis is not because you have sufficient evidence, but because you cannot disprove it. Mm-hmm. This is why the Havana Syndrome, the directed energy, it remains the most plausible hypothesis, because they cannot invalidate, they cannot falsify it. So the hypothesis remain, just like the hypothesis. The hypothesis you just formed. So it is possible, and I would like to see more evidence. But most importantly, I would like somebody to try to invalidate it. That's what makes the inability to invalidate a scientific hypothesis makes the hypothesis stronger. But that's just scientific thinking. I think we should apply more of it to our daily living.
Is there a think tank, an independent think tank that is not government funded, not government directed, that is hunting down what Havana Syndrome is, since the Department of Defense, the FBI, the CIA, no one's getting back to anyone? And I did, my requisite study on this. it doesn't seem like there's much interest from our government in solving this issue when it comes to the public. Will there be an institution that those affected and those not affected, right, that are interested in solving this equation, if you will? Is that going to be happening? Have you heard anything about that?
As far as neuroweapon experts, every single one of them is, except for the whistleblowers that came through, they all connected somehow and funded by the government. I know in Europe there's an organization called ICATOR that is playing a lawsuit in Belgium because of the specifics of the judicial procedures. You can actually file a lawsuit, and the judge, and they will assign an investigative judge to rule over that case. This is why they picked Belgium.
Right.
So this organization, ICATOR, which I'm a part of, and provided my testimony. Unfortunately, whatever happens in Belgium does not necessarily affect
the U.S.
citizens. I'm also on the advisory board of largest organization for targeted individuals and people suffering from Havana Syndrome called targetedjustice.com. And it's down where you are, Sergey, in Texas.
Good state.
And the problem in the States is every time you file a lawsuit and you name a wrong defendant, or it can, if you sue the government, it's a losing proposition. We actually 200 cases filed in connection with targeting and Havana Syndrome. They're all listed on the website, and they all been dismissed for one reason or another. Wow. So we understand that suing the government is a losing proposition. So I think the way out of it is to make it a political issue. So if it happens, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And people saying, oh, well, I have nothing to hide. I'm nobody. I'm nobody either. Right. I don't hold any secrets. I'm just happen to be stubborn and medically inclined, and I know how to talk to physicians. And this is why I got this proper diagnosis that can be swept under the rug. And yet still, neither the FBI nor DOD has any interest in investigating my case.
Well, we're going to have you back because we're at the end of our program right here. But Len Ber, can you really quick give us your YouTube channel?
Len Ber MD. I'm pretty sure. My main social media platform is Twitter. My handle is @PSardonicus. And I post YouTube links. I do media updates. I do scientific reviews. I do conversations with experts, especially the ones who disagree with us.
Yeah, there you go. This has been a very interesting episode. Len, if you want, I'd love to have you back. Thank you so much. Len Ber talking about Havana Syndrome right here. I'm Sergey Brown, and this is the Crash Cart Rule. We'll see you next time.